Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast presented by Great Railing. I am Jordan Hall, and as always, I am joined by the dynamic Joe Fordyce. Joe, the Flyers are coming off an interesting back-to-back. They win in Detroit on Saturday 2-1. They come home on Sunday to face a really good Winnipeg Jets team. They lose 5-3. They fell down 3-0 early in the first period. Fight back to tie it up, but still lose 5-3. Joe, a busy stretch for the team. It's 5 games in 7 days. In total, coming up here with the games next week, 9 games in 15 days. Busy stretch. I wonder if the Flyers are hitting somewhat of a wall, Joe. What do you think? What have you seen?
Well, that may be the case, but what I will say is if this is them hitting their wall, A, it's not that bad, and B, I think any team would hit these kind of walls. I mean, just take the last 2 games if you want to just break it down into segments. I mean, they go to Detroit and they grind out a win, an ugly game, a boring game, quite frankly, and they're like Torts, I believe, said after, it was just a matter of not blinking first, and they didn't do that. And then they scored 2 because they needed to. So, they ended up needing the 2 goals in that game. So that was big. And then you go back to last night's game and you get down 3-0 early and it's a back-to-back. And, they're pro athletes, so I don't want to say you could understand, but you could totally see where they might wave the white flag and just say, all right, this isn't our night. And you end up getting run out of your own building. And that doesn't happen. They come back and tie it. And then, quite frankly, a soft goal beats them. I mean, Felix Sandstrom himself said that that's a goal that can't go in. That happens. And that's why they lose last night. But I was impressed with their play over the second and most of the third period. Quite frankly, I thought they were the better team after the first period for much of that game. They were the better team. They don't have the better talent. And that's the problem because, they're running, the Kyle Connor and Blake Wheeler and those guys out there. And the Flyers don't have that type of skill on their team outside of a few guys. So, but if this is hitting a wall, I'll take it. I mean, the schedule's been tough, but it's not as if they're not showing signs of a team that's about to go into, these 10-game slides that we've seen over the last 2 seasons. I don't see that because this team, how many games this year have we seen them go down by multiple goals and then come back and make it a game or win, And so maybe they're hitting a little bit of a wall, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And I also don't know what team in this league wouldn't hit a wall, when your schedule gets like this, and everybody plays the same kind of schedule. So, teams go through these peaks and valleys. You look at some of the best teams in the league. I mean, they all go outside of maybe the Bruins this year. Everybody goes through these kinds of funks where they're having back-to-back and 5 and 7 and, those kind of things. And it just, part of it being a good team, a contending team, a team that has playoff aspirations, which at the beginning of the season, I certainly wouldn't have said that this team is in that category. I don't know now. I don't think they're a playoff team. The way they talk, they seems like they think they could be. And these are the kind of things you have to deal with and kind of persevere through if you want to be one of those teams.
It's definitely a far cry from last year in the sense that the most notable thing in my mind during this 9-4-0 stretch since the holiday break is that they haven't lost consecutive games. Last year, for a team that went through 2 double-digit skids, and they went through another one earlier this season, they haven't let one loss turn into another. And that's, to me, one of the most notable things during this stretch is responding to losses. They have a chance now to respond to another loss. But that's a big thing in my mind. And yeah, the wall that I think they might be hitting is just offensively. Like when you're fatigued, that definitely impacts the ability to finish. And they were scoring goals at a much higher clip. They've come back to earth now a little bit from a goal scoring standpoint. Are starting to kind of have to grind out games, get back in that low scoring nature of games, which is not a terrible thing because I think teams need to find out how to wait. They need to find a way to win games that way too. When they're not feeling super fresh, they're on the second night of a back-to-back or a busy stretch. You're not feeling great body-wise. How do you find a way to win? And they've been in a couple of these situations now. They've found a way to win in a couple of these games. And yeah, Joe, I thought that was really telling last night that maybe last year they get run out of the building there. Instead,
I think they definitely get run out of the building last year.
Yeah.
And, I just to follow your point, what you just said there about hitting a wall offensively, the concerning thing I would say is I feel like guys like Konechny and Farabee, and there's a few other guys that are a little less noticeable in this last stretch of games. Now, Konechny's always noticeable because he's always doing other stuff. I'm just talking about at the offensive end. I don't feel like we're sitting there saying, man, this guy's scoring every night anymore. And Farabee, quite frankly, I don't know where his consistency has gone this season because there were games where he's everywhere. We've seen a couple of them this year, but overall, I feel like he's been pretty disappointing this season so far in terms of production. You're just not seeing that guy that we talked about in the offseason and parts of last season where we talked about him as a guy the Flyers were going to look to go out and get us some offense. I don't see him as that guy this year, and I'm not sure what the reason is for it. John Tortorella has talked about it, him not wanting to use that injury as an excuse. But if that's the kind of stuff, like you said, an offensive wall, those are a couple of things I've been thinking. I was thinking it during the game last night that Konechny just seems a little less electric, maybe is the word, because it seemed like he was everywhere for a good part of the season, and then over the last few weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a little less so. And I think that part is the part where you be a little concerned, or you just look at the schedule and say, look at this, there's back-to-backs with travel in the middle, and there's, they start the month with a West Coast trip, and they come back, and then they're on the road. It's a tough point in the schedule, and I believe John Tortorella called them the dog days the other night, and we talked about it with Scott last night on the pregame show, just how challenging those days are, that part of the season. And, he said it's a grind, and he said, quite frankly, John Tortorella is not a guy that is big on chalking up things to, hey, it's the dog days, we're going to have some down games. That's not really, he doesn't just kind of sit back and let that happen. So, maybe they're a little worn down. So this break will come at the perfect time, I think.
Flyers Talk is brought to you by Great Railing. Stop into Great Railing for the highest quality and lowest prices on all your railing, decking, and fencing needs. Joe, we saw what they could do out of the holiday break, which isn't going to be as long as the break coming up after this stretch of games this week. They'll have 8 days between games coming up here, so maybe that could really do wonders for this team. But it'll be, I think, telling to see how they finish up here before the break, because they're fighting through a busy stretch, and we always look for signs of growth and how is this team different from last year, and are they getting better? And one thing I think you want to see is fight through stretches where there's some adversity, whether it be a couple of losses, some injuries crop up, or a busy stretch of games and you need to battle through. The really good teams find a way to do it, whether it be layers of depth that they have, some guys stepping up, or guys that have kind of been around and done that, and they understand getting through when they're not at their best. So I think this will be certainly a telling stretch ahead. Joe, you mentioned the goal given up by Felix Sandstrom. It's a 3-3 game. The Flyers just kill off 28 seconds of a 5-on-3, then the ensuing 5-on-4, and it looks like that's a momentum-changing sequence. Like, they just tie it up. They go through a big stretch of killing off penalties, and you really think, man, they could win this game. And then Felix Sandstrom kind of he lets up a softie. It was a goal that the guy kind of even whiffed on, and it kind of just slides through his leg. He was very accountable after the game, said he needs to stop that puck. And I think it makes everyone think, where's Samuel Ersson? Why is he not still here? What did you think of the decision with waivers included on Felix Sandstrom and Ersson going down? What did you think?
Well, I mean, it's tough. And if you don't understand the intricacies of it and you're just looking at it like this guy was playing this way and they sent him down, it doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense there's a shortage of goalies in this league. And the Flyers couldn't send Sandstrom, they couldn't keep Sandstrom with the Phantoms past the conditioning assignment without him clearing waivers. And my guess is the information they received was that he would not clear waivers. And they also want Samuel Ersson to play. And that's where he'll play. Now, that said, after last night, who knows? But I do anticipate them riding Carter Hart here right into the break. You don't have a back-to-back game. You have a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday long break. My sense is Carter gets the 3 starts, and then you kind of reassess over the break. But I don't know. I mean, we know John Tortorella was very high on Samuel Ersson. He was high on him at training camp, and then when he came up, the way he was playing, so does he kind of maybe try to impose his will and Ersson becomes the backup goaltender for the remainder of the season? I don't know. I mean, they have to take the risk of losing Sandstrom, and something tells me some piece of information that Chuck Fletcher and Danny Briere had said that Sandstrom would not clear waivers and they would end up losing him. And that's why they made the move they did with Ersson. And, I mean, you can't really fault them. The team went into this season with kind of a lack of a plan, a backup goaltender. I mean, the past 2 seasons, you had Martin Jones, and it was clear that was your backup goalie. I don't know that the plans were as clear this year, and I guess they were trying to protect themselves. But if you're trying to win games and you're looking for the best opportunity, I think we'd probably all be in an agreement that Samuel Ersson's the best opportunity to have to win games in the games when Carter needs a spell. And they would need to find a way to make that happen.
If anything, I thought Samuel Ersson really proved himself up here and opened some eyes and made a very loud, strong case to be the backup. And now it's Felix Sandstrom's turn to kind of answer the bell and either field the competition or almost let Samuel Ersson take the future job. But the Flyers, I thought, made a fine decision. You don't want to lose Felix Sandstrom on waivers. He would have to go through waivers to go to the Phantoms and stay there for good. And he's 26. He's under team control for the rest of this season and next season. And you could use that. Like, it's a 26-year-old goalie that has some promise, was a former third-round pick in 2015. And you don't want to lose that for nothing. So I don't really see big issues with it. If the Flyers were contending and they were like in the heat of a playoff race, I would say, hey, keep Ersson up here. He's the proven backup that's winning games, can push Carter Hart, gives you a chance to win when Hart's in or not. But they're not, and the team's in transition. If the games get bigger and maybe they want to make a decision there where Sandstrom's really proving he can't be dependable at all in net, then you can go to Ersson. But they're not in that spot, and let Ersson go down, play a ton of games, help the Phantoms in their playoff race, be the guy, and figure out what you have in Sandstrom now, and you don't want to lose him for nothing. And maybe Sandstrom could be a trade chip down the line come the trade deadline, come the summer. He gives you depth next year if he's still here. And I think he's better than what he's shown. I don't think he's gotten a lot of help either. If you look at his games, he has not gotten the run support that Ersson and Hart at times has gotten. So give him some time. I wouldn't think he's what he's shown. And if you look at his numbers, you think, wow, this guy might not be an NHL goalie. I think he can do more. if he gets a little more help. But yes, give him credit, I thought he was very accountable, Joe, after that goal.
Absolutely. And if you take the fourth goal aside, in the first period, he didn't get any help. Like you said, he didn't get help from his defensemen. I mean, there were giveaways and turnovers. They turned into to fast breaks the other way. And when you have players like Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler, these are high-flying players that know how to set each other up. This is a second-place team that, with the win last night, I believe, moved into a tie or jumped the Dallas Stars in front of them in their division. They're one of the best teams in the Western Conference. And if you start turning the puck over and not taking care of it, this is what happens. Transition, and they score. And John Tortorella said it afterwards. 2 breakdowns, and they both end up in the net. And then, the one goal is a tip goal. The other 2 goals, breakdowns, it ends up in the back of the net. And as he said all season long, this is not a team that can afford to make those mistakes because they can't recover from them. Last night they recovered from them, and then it turned out that the soft goal was the mistake, if you will, that they couldn't recover from. He didn't get a lot of help, but then he did lock it down for most of the rest of the game. So, it's not like the guy he wasn't a sieve all night or anything like that. So, he showed what he could do. And, it's not as if the Jets took the pedal, came off the pedal in the second period. It's the same players out there. There were power plays that they didn't score on, and Sandstrom was put to the test, and he made the saves, and he just let us off one end at the end.
Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new Season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Joe, Kevin Hayes is the Flyers all-star, and it seems like he's really turned it up a notch recently offensively. 13 points in his last 11 games. He had 2 power play goals in that loss to the Jets. It was nice to see the power play start to get going a little bit. The Jets had the second best PK in the league, and they scored twice on it. So Kevin Hayes, I thought, has kind of answered the bell here, and to me, he's showing some veteran leadership, along with Scott Lawton, who's almost been a point-per-game guy over the last 23 games. I think he's got 21 points. So when you have some young players that are perhaps hitting a stretch that they're not really used to in terms of playing this many games and this many number of days, you have a couple of veteran guys that have stepped up, and I thought Hayes and Lawton have done that. What have you seen from those two?
Yeah, last night, both of those goals Hayes scored last night, the one definitely. These are not easy goals to score. They're the one, he's basically on the goal line. And then the other one is, a perfect bounce off the goalie pads to him. And, he doesn't miss. And that's what you want to see from him. When you have opportunities like that to be, to be cashing in on them. And Lawton, to me, has always been a Swiss Army knife for this team. He can play up and down the lineup. He does whatever's asked. He kills penalties. He can play on the power play. And he really is a leader on this team. You can, just by the simple fact that you can see how many times the Flyers have him out there talking after games, you can see he really is a guy that speaks for this team. He is a captain-like type of player, and he seems to always be there for what this team needs. And, not only is he killing penalties, but he's scoring and creating shorthanded goals consistently. It feels like now they're out there when they're on the kill, they're thriving on trying to get penalty, shorthanded goals. And that's, Lawton's the one that started that trend. He's been that way for a couple of years now. And, I just think that's, it's kind of a new wrinkle where you go out there and you try to take advantage of your disadvantage, I guess, if that makes any sense. But this team has managed to do it somewhat regularly. And, I'm impressed with both of those guys. And, I feel like Kevin Hayes is one of those guys where just when you start to say, where has Hayes been? He'll have a stretch of games like these last two, or, two of the last three with the hat trick and then the two goals. It's really, it's what you need from your veterans, your leaders, your highest paid players, your top six forwards. And the Flyers would definitely like more consistency, but, they'll take what they can get right now, and maybe this leads to more consistency.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, a lot of people, there's probably a good portion of people that wanted Travis Konecny to be an all-star, thought he was deserving. But, I think Kevin Hayes is very deserving too. Look at his numbers and what he's done from the start to this point of the season. Been very consistent, scoring almost every night. He's moved around. He's playing wing now. I thought he's done a lot. I think he's been there. He's been a guy you can say he's been there almost every single night, and he's been through some wars with John Tortorella in terms of moving positions, being benched for a couple of third periods, being benched for a game. I think if you put a couple of different players in that same situation, I'm not sure they respond the same way. To me, he's been a guy that's said, hey, I can take the beatings from the coach, and I can still get back up and be the same guy in the locker room, be the same offensive player on the ice. I'm sure the Flyers want to see different things, maybe defensively from him, and see him be more of a force on the PK like he's been in the past. But he's been there kind of every single night offensively and has had the same personality in the locker room. I think all good things there for sure.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say with Hayes in terms of consistency, more of what I'm referring to is smarter decisions with the puck. We've seen at times this year him make some careless-looking turnovers, and I think those have been the things that have led to battles with the coach. We've seen him kind of dangle with the puck around around the offensive blue line with nobody behind him, and that's always a very, very dicey thing, and we've seen it go the other way on him at times, and that's where I think he would needs to button up the game a little bit. Is the decision making with the puck and protecting the puck, and really just not being so willing to hand the momentum to the opponent, and willing to give them odd man rushes and so forth. And like you said, if he could be a little more of a force on the penalty kill, because we know that was such a valuable part of his game when they first signed him here. He would rag the puck and kill penalties himself. And we haven't really seen a ton of that, so I'm sure the Flyers would like to see more of that going forward.
Joe, let's tee up this final stretch of games here before the break. Tuesday against the Kings at home, Thursday against the Wild in Minnesota, and Saturday against the Jets in Winnipeg. Joe, what do you think the goal should be for the Flyers? In my mind, I think it would be really nice to see them, if you're a fan of the team or your management, it would be nice to see them take two of these three games. That would actually have them at hockey 500 going into this extended break, which includes the All-Star break. I think that'd be a nice little spot for the team. If you're at hockey 500 for this extended break, I think that will be major strides. If you look back, they didn't win their 20th game until March 20th last year. This season, they already have 20 wins. I think hockey 500 would be a nice spot for them. What do you think?
Yeah, I think 2 of 3 is really what you go into this last stretch looking for. Now, they're playing 3 good teams, 2 of those on the road. One of them they just saw last night. So that's not going to get any easier in Winnipeg, and that's your last game before the break. So there's that trap to deal with as well, and also the Winnipeg in January trap. So yeah, I'm sure it'll be a balmy single-digit degree temperature out there, if not a negative. So, and Minnesota, the same thing. And that's a team that they're not super familiar with, but a good team in the Western Conference. And then the Kings I don't think the Kings are going to come in here and make it easy on them, because the Flyers beat them in LA earlier this month. So that's going to be on their mind, and they're a team with playoff aspirations. So I don't think any of these games are going to be easy, but I think you go in and you say, let's try to take 2 out of 3, but you can't take 2 out of 3 until you win the first one. So what the best way to do that is win the one game that's at home. So, that would be their best chance, I think, is they have to win against the Kings, a team they've already beat this season, and then head out on the road for the Minnesota and Winnipeg games.
Yeah, and 2 of 3 would give them a chance at preventing consecutive losses, which I think would be such a sign of growth if they go from the holiday break to this extended break with the All-Star break without consecutive losses. Like, to me, that would say so much about where they've come from last year, where double-digit skids almost became the norm, which is scary. So, yeah, that would be another sign of growth. And I think that those are things you're looking to see from the Flyers this year. I don't think people are looking for them to be in a playoff race. If they are, it's a major kind of icing on the cake type of thing. You get a little playoff talk and chatter and all that fun stuff. But really, you're just looking for signs of growth, and then that would be another one. But we'll have all the coverage coming up on Flyers Talk Podcast. Plenty more to go, and we'll have coverage over the break as well. We'll have plenty to talk about, and we'll cover it all right here. Joe Fordyce, Flyers pre- and post-game live producer, thank you so much. Great seeing you, great chatting with you. A major thank you to Ben Barry, our podcast producer and guru. And Flyers fans, of course, as always, thank you so much for listening to the latest Flyers Talk Podcast presented by Great Railing. Wherever you get your podcast, please rate and listen, and we can't wait to talk to you next time.